Recently, I had a discussion with Tjump where we talked about certain arguments for or against God's existence. It was a very helpful and honestly, it was a very respectful conversation. I applaud Tjump on being so respectful and patient. And if you haven't checked it out, I recommend you go check it out. It was a great conversation. And I'll put it in the comments and also in the description. So go check that out. But the main reason I'm making this video in the first place is just simply to show you a few things I learned from that discussion that I think would be beneficial to you. The first is that if you're presenting some sort of belief, or even if you hold the belief yourself, let's say that God exists, you have to have some sort of justification for that belief. I mean, I could arbitrarily say that, in this context, I think this example would help a lot. If I were to go up to you and say, I believe that that Buddhism is true, if the viewer watching this right now is a Christian, then you would say that just because I believe that that's true doesn't have any bearing, and just because I believe it doesn't mean that you're going to believe it. I need to have some sort of reason or evidence or justification to bring to the table to justify my belief. And the same applies to the atheistic and theistic context. If we're going to have a discussion, you ought to have some justification for your belief. And even personally, if I'm going to be honest with myself, and I believe, let's say, that God exists, I had to have some justification or reason to believe that God exists. And I don't want to stay on this point too long, but I just wanted to make that simple point. If you believe something, you ought to have some justification for that belief if you're honest with yourself. The second point is that honest discussion, in my opinion, gets you a lot farther than dishonest argumentation. And I'm not saying that if you argue or have a debate with someone that I don't think you're being dishonest. But what I do think is that if you're having a discussion, if the opposing side brings up a point that you honestly don't know or you haven't read up on or haven't studied, it's better for you to be honest and admit, okay, I don't have that figured out, and admit that you don't have that you're not as read up on that topic and you don't have much to bring to the table. It's better for you to be honest and further that conversation than for you to be dishonest and try to argue from a position where you're unlearned, you don't really know much about it, and you're just really arguing from ignorance. I don't think that's helpful at all. The third point I want to make is that if I never admitted in that discussion with Tjump that there are certain things I don't know, and I never studied from that, and I never learned from that as I am now, I would never have a confidence in my faith. And I want to explain what I mean by that, because this might get me a little trouble. The reason I'm saying that is because in order to have confidence or faith in an idea or a concept, you first have to have knowledge of that concept. And Eric made this point in our discussion we had on the soul. If let's say I had the belief that this chair will hold me up, I first have to have knowledge that the chair, has the potential and the capability to hold someone up. I also have the evidence or the experience that last week I sat in a chair and it held me up. Therefore, I have reason or justification to believe the chair will hold me up. Therefore, because I have this knowledge or a justified true belief that the chair will hold me up, I can put my confidence in that. I can put my confidence in what I know. And the same thing applies to Christianity or even theism. In order to put your confidence in God, or let's say Jesus, I first have to have knowledge that he exists. And how do I know that he exists? I can't just arbitrarily pop in the, have a thought, God exists, therefore he exists. That's not a justification for the belief in a God. So, being honest with yourself and truly seeking the answers and truly seeking a justification for your belief allows you to then put your confidence in and the knowledge that God exists, for example. And I think that will definitely give you a confidence in your faith. Now, sure you could live underneath a rock, and I don't mean that just to be sarcastic. If you were to go live in a cave and never hear any objections to your faith, or never hear any opposing evidence or counterexamples to your belief, sure, I guess you could say you have confidence in your belief, because you may sincerely or even think that you have certainty that your belief is true. But unless you have a justification, and I keep bringing this up because I think this is really the main thing I learned from the discussion, so that's why I'm bringing it up so much. In order to have a confidence in that set of beliefs, you have to first have a justification that the belief is even true in the first place. I mean, because most people would not put the confidence in something they don't think is true. I mean, there might be some people that do that, but I don't think any rational person would do that. The fourth thing I want to make, the fourth point I want to make, is if we as Christians are ever to be taken seriously, or even ever to be heard by the opposing side, we need to have a justification for our faith. But even if we desire to even have a justification for our faith, we need to at least listen to the opposing side, and from that, from hearing the opposing views, develop a rational basis for our faith. Because if you don't have any, if you're not willing to have a discussion with someone and you're just wanting to preach and preach and preach that, this is true, this is true, this is true, just because you firmly believe it, or even pound your fist that, oh, this belief is true, it doesn't really get you anywhere. I could have the firm belief that the sky is pink, for example. That doesn't mean that should be taken seriously, or that it's a rational belief. And I think Christianity and theism is a rational belief that does have justification. But the only thing I wanted to point out was just what I learned from the video, and I'll definitely go into more detail on each of these points and show why we should even have justification for a belief. There's a lot of people that think that just because Christians have justification for the belief that God exists, that it's some sort of, that you're putting your faith in evidence and not God, which I don't think that's the case. But there's a lot of things we'll definitely get to in future videos. But this video was mainly just to give my thoughts on the discussion with Tjump, and just to show you what I learned. So I hope that was helpful. I hope you learned a few things, and if you haven't checked that video out, I recommend you go check that out. And this, of course, is to give you a more confident faith.